it can be a classic clash of cultures. How the government deals with legal highs has been one such flashpoint since the summer, when the government announced a ban on the herbal stimulant cat against scientific advice. In the past, politicians have traditionally turned to science, most especially in times of war, though it was Winston Churchill who famously said scientific advisors should be on tap but not on top. Many scientists now feel that going along with that view would just be too meek, and that science advice is about more than just setting out the spectrum of views, but actually making sure that policy is based on the best balance of evidence. And not just in war, but across a whole range of pressing and globally interconnected threats. Challenges such as the growing risk of cyber attack, ensuring food security, and deciding how to respond to climate change. Professor David Nutt was made chairman of the government's Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs in May 2008. He had a number of run-ins with politicians. In 2009, after comparing the relative risks of taking ecstasy and those of horse riding. Then later that same year, when he was eventually dismissed by the then Home Secretary Alan Johnson, after saying that government classification of cannabis was at odds with scientific measures of actual harm. Professor Colin Blakemore was one of the judges of today's award, and he's also worked with Professor Nutt in the past. He claims the whole affair had a lasting impact, a set of principles on the way scientific advice should be treated.
Science underpins almost everything that we do, and increasingly so. Everything from, what mobile phone you choose to whether we're going to try and tackle global warming. Increasingly, the public themselves are involved, whether it's through who they elect or through their own actions, in making decisions which should be based on evidence. They are exposed to evidence of varying quality from all sorts of sources, from government, from the press, from advertising and so on. What is important is that the clarity of high quality scientific advice is available to everybody.
Mario Dunn was advising Alan Johnson at the Home Office at the time of the David Nutt row. He thinks Churchill got it right.
Scientists have a very high regard for themselves, and those who get on government committees tend to have an even higher regard for themselves. Our experience under the last Labour government was that, give the advice by all means, but don't think because you've given the advice that government has to accept it. And if government doesn't accept it for whatever reason, that doesn't mean it's a challenge to your authority. It doesn't mean that you're being undermined. All it means is, thanks for what you've advised, but, in this case, no thanks.
But many government advisors feel their first duty is to speak out to the taxpayers whose cash often funds scientific research, not the politician who might just ignore it.
Susan Watson, Professor David Nutt joins me now. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Do you stand by what you said in 2009 that got you sacked?
Well, yeah, I do. And I think actually since then I've realised there's been greater problems as a result of some of the failure to be logical about drugs. And particularly it's been clear in the last few years how medical research is impeded by the drug laws. So the laws we've put in place to stop people using drugs are actually stopping scientists using drugs and developing new treatments.
But would you say it in the same way as you said in 2009, or would you be more judicious?
No, I think not. I think I'd be even more forceful now because clearly, we haven't moved on. In the last 4 years, if anything, we've moved backwards.
But do you accept that politicians there's a calibration between what you as a scientist say, between they've got to take into account the victims of drug abuse and also the politics, essentially?
Well, I would say where you have good scientific evidence that a policy is not working or a new policy would work, you should bring it in. And if we really want to reduce the harms of drug use to people, we should do something about tobacco and alcohol.
But do you still think that tobacco and alcohol is more dangerous than LSD?
Unquestionably,
And would
yes.
you legalise LSD then?
No, I'm not in favour of legalising drugs. I'm in favour of having some kind of regulated access, decriminalisation for users, but in much more of an equal playing field between the drugs which we currently are suffering from, tobacco and alcohol, and recreational drugs.
You wouldn't decriminalise cannabis then?
I'd certainly decriminalise cannabis, absolutely.
And what about ecstasy then?
I think any drug that's less harmful than alcohol which is most drugs, should be decriminalised.
Well, but on that basis, you would decriminalise LSD.
I would. Yes, I decriminalise, absolutely. I don't think criminalising people who use drugs is useful at all. We know that from other countries where there have been real benefits in terms of interventions by decriminalisation.
Susan mentioned cat, though, right at the beginning of that film. That is a controversial one, though, isn't it?
Not at all. I mean, the banning of cat is completely unnecessary. There are almost
but we know
no
it does
harm
hellish damage, doesn't it?
Cat does almost no damage. We only banned it because the Americans have been banging on to us for about the last 10 years to justify their banning it.
So let's just look more broadly then at what the government has done as far as you're concerned. Their record, as it were, on their response to what you would say is evidence-based science. Alcohol pricing. With alcohol, they treat alcohol. What's gone wrong?
Well, they just basically lost courage at the last minute. They started off making the right statement, minimum pricing, it will work, it will reduce harms to particularly heavy users, and then, probably due to pressure from the drinks industry, they backed off.
And is that, do you think, will have long-term damage?
Of course it will. Of course it will. Alcohol is now the leading cause of death in men in this country between the ages of 16 and 54, and minimum pricing would have reduced deaths by about 10%.
Okay, let's talk about cigarettes then, because originally there was a plan to clear all branding, clear all advertising from packets, and that's been changed.
I'm sure that would have worked. With the Australian experience suggests that is working, because you take away the glamour of the cigarette.
So here we have, the two things that you think are the big killers, alcohol and cigarettes, and you think the government is getting both of these entirely wrong. And 4 years ago, you're one of the senior advisors on the misuse of drugs. So where has the disconnect been in the kind of things that you as a scientist are saying and government policy?
Well, government is currently trying to get re-elected. So I think what they're looking at are simplistic ways of appealing to the population, to the voters. I think the voters know they're wrong. In fact, for instance...
But if the voters knew they were wrong, surely the voters, they would do the right thing themselves, whereby they would take less alcohol and they would also smoke fewer cigarettes.
Well, to some extent they're doing that. But let's be clear about this. Every taxpayer pays £1,000 in tax each year simply to allow us to service the level of current drinking through the health service and through policing, etc. So there's an enormous tax burden on people because we don't have minimum pricing of alcohol.
But on the other hand, people would say that actually people with free will make up their own minds, that actually what you're saying has been quite patronising to people who should be able to decide this for themselves.
Not at all, because actually the whole point about drinking alcohol is to take away your self-control. That is why most people use it.
Well, that's not the only reason for drinking alcohol, is to take away self-control.
But it's one of the major consequences of drinking alcohol.
But if people want to do that, then, should they be allowed to do that? Or should there be then some kind of penalty on them when it comes to the NHS? Would you be in favour of that?
Not in favour of penalties, but I just think we need a rational approach. We should be pricing alcohol so that people drink less of it.
Are the scientists and the government not getting the message across then? You're out of government now. Are the scientists and government not actually, are they supine?
I think government scientists are in a difficult position at present because mostly they don't get listened to.
So are they being supine rather than actually risking their jobs?
I don't see anyone being as forceful as I was, no.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, that is all for tonight. Emily's here tomorrow. We leave you with the Berlin busker who was singing Bronski Beat's Small Town Boy when a passing dog walker apparently decided he could do it better. Good night.
Turn away, run away, turn away, run away.
Run away, turn away.
Oh, wait, 1, 2, 3, run away, turn away, run away, turn away, run away. Run away, turn away, run away, turn away, run away.